All right. Well, Rabbi Joseph, good morning. Welcome to you.
Good morning, Jason.
I mean, it's almost
Good
lunchtime
morning.
for you, right?
Well, it's 11 o'clock. So I got up very early because it gets hot and intense. And this is the week Carnival begins.
Okay.
So we want to get out on the beach, make sure our exercise is done so I could clean myself and be ready for this conversation.
Are you a beach walker or a swimmer?
I'm a beach walker. And when I walk with my wife, I walk on the sidewalk. When I walk with myself, just by myself, I walk on the sand next to the water. Different cardiacs.
Okay. What about what is a typical Brazilian breakfast and lunch that you partake of?
Oh, well, when you're on regimini, a diet, it doesn't meet the standard of typical. Lots of bread, cheese, very good strong coffee. They like it more often than not con leche. Um, I still go with a double shot of espresso from the machine I brought from the US. So,
Okay. Okay. What kind of machine?
Jura,
Okay. All right. You're a coffee guy. Okay.
I am a coffee guy. I'm a coffee guy. And I drink iced coffee here, which they think is one of the strangest things. Coffee, cold. No, 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 no.
I do.
I was
It makes me
I was told
laugh.
by the Indians, we like our coffee like our women. Hot.
That is funny. Um, that is funny. Well, you have sent me an op-ed that you want to talk about, and this connects with the Lenten series of conversations that we will do on Monday nights on your book, What Am I Missing? Um, and I will send out the link for people to sign up for that. But the op-ed title is Choosing Rebirth Over Revenge After My Release from Gaza. So first, give us a synopsis of what Liat is writing about, and then we can discuss it further.
Survivors always get my attention. Survivors offer us a perspective that we have learned since the end of the Shoah, the Holocaust, with the likes of Elie Wiesel, Primo Levi. They bear witness, and their conversations with us are testimonies. So when I saw this, I thought, all right, here is an Israeli, double citizenship American, who has taken the experience and wants to offer us a witness, a testimony. She has my attention. Her husband was killed. Her children survived. She was herself a kidnapped hostage and let out during the first hostage release. I think it bears witness for us to stop one moment and realize that the world has, for its own set of reasons, forgotten the remaining 136 hostages.
You could completely,
Yesterday,
completely forgotten.
News that 20% of those, according to Israeli intelligence, are in all probability dead. And now the negotiations for whatever pause, whatever ceasefire, now the price goes up exponentially because we are talking about members of the IDF. Let's remember that hostage taking and terrorism have an ugly historical background. This is the reason that terrorists attack. They want their prisoners out of prison. And to do that, the highest value leverage is kidnapping people.
Mm-hmm.
What will it mean to get back the remains, the bodies, and those alive? This is a horrible set of questions for which there are no credible answers. And now you have a witness to the experience of being a hostage who's saying,
I just want to interrupt there and just point, like, because you mentioned before we started recording some of our friends' discomfort with you identifying as a Zionist, and whatever conclusions politically people may want to draw about the war and the situation leading up to the war. At the very least, so empathy is an attribute that features in your book, right? At the very least,
yes.
I think people need to be empathetic to just the sheer fact that leaders in Israel are faced with dilemmas and questions and moral calculus that people living in a safe place like the United States can't even begin to understand.
Kidnapping in America is a horrific crime that involves ransom money. I know of no act of kidnapping in America that involved the taking of a hostage so prisoners would be let out of prison. This is a common historical trait of the terrorism in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how anyone who has children can look even at the brazen nature of the Israeli government, the current government, for which I offer no support, and not feel the slightest bit of anguish at a human level. They are going to give back prisoners who have blood on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have a op-ed in the New York Times talking about Tikkun, rebirth, over and against revenge. Let's go back to Leviticus 19:18, that wonderful, wonderful, love your neighbor as yourself. That's the B part of the verse. The A part of the verse, don't commit revenge and bear a grudge. The reason love your neighbor as yourself is so quintessentially impossible is because it's the flip side of don't commit revenge and bear a grudge.
Mm-hmm.
I think Liat offers us a historical analogy that survivors who became a necessary generation of founding refugees as Israel came to know itself after World War II. Those people made a commitment to move beyond the burden of memory. We're going to invest in an unknown future. Many of these people were not Zionists. They had not participated, as it were, in the Zionism that moved from the Balfour Declaration into the initial generation of Aliyah. These were displaced persons,
Mm-hmm.
survivors, for whom there was no past available. They could not go back. And so they chose to go forward to a very difficult Israel, an Israel that was completely underdeveloped. And I think she's correct. When you make a commitment to the future, you are making a commitment to a rebirth. You need all the energy that you would otherwise expend on the obsession of the past, the compulsion of holding back revenge, and you move it in an entirely different direction. The horror of October 7th is that among those killed and those who witnessed the killing were Holocaust survivors. Those who had come and found a life they had not expected. Now, whatever you might think of Israel and its policies and protocols with Palestinians, Holocaust survivors are not colonialists. They are the survivors of a radical evil that sought to exterminate an entire people. And here you have someone saying, I want an Israel. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just speaking of evil, I just wanted to call attention to this paragraph here. Liat writes, on October 7th, the Jewish people suffered our greatest tragedy since the Holocaust. That tragedy came to my own home in kibbutz near Oz, which was burned down as I was taken to Gaza as a hostage. I was held in a home with Gazans and Hamas fighters with no news of the outside world. Terrified, alone, and unsure of the fate of my family, I kept myself going for nearly 2 months, promising myself I wouldn't miss the graduation ceremony of the class I teach, and imagining reuniting with my husband Aviv and our 3 children. I'm a dual citizen of Israel and the U.S., and I was released after 54 days, thanks in large part to the intervention of President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken. My children, thankfully, survived. One after terrifying hours in hiding, one by sheer luck of having been elsewhere that day, one who staved off the attackers by holding the door of a safe room closed. But my home of 30 years was burned beyond recognition, and the home of my heart, my husband Aviv, was among the 1,200 killed by Hamas in Israel on that terrible day. So immense was the destruction, I found that terrorists had even killed my dog.
I'm not able to fathom what that paragraph means in the actuality of human experience, any more than I can read the testimony of Elie Wiesel, Primo Levi, or so many survivors. We who are not survivors are morally obligated to stand and be present when a survivor gives testimony. That's what this op-ed is. It's a testimony. It's nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with whether or not you think Zionism is a racist, colonialist project. Here is an innocent woman who was attacked by terrorists whose mission is the elimination of a community. And to be present to a testimony, that is what Christians are doing as they prepare for Easter. They are being reminded, in my view as a rabbi, of the burden of a message in history. And so I don't care about the number of different possibilities that people bring me about their political ideas. Shut up and be present to this woman's testimony. She has, as often I've met among survivors of the Shoah, chosen to find some positive mechanism to move her heart and mind in a direction of growth, rebirth. I think it's quite extraordinary that already before there is any sense of this coming to an end, she can speak in the closing paragraph of this op-ed. I want to participate in an Israel that cares about its neighbors. That's far beyond the Hebrew text, love your neighbor. That goes to the Matthean text, love your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
That is already messianic.
And it's, I mean, you know, the the Sermon on the Mount assumes that those who follow Jesus will have made enemies for following him. You know, and just as the Hebrew Bible presumes that a part of being faithful to the covenant and living out the Israel's vocation will pit them against others, right? That you know, God chooses Israel in no small part to stand up, you know, for Elijah to stand up against Ahab and Jezebel, for example. So it's not some sort of liberal sentimentality that suggests that we should pretend like the differences between us aren't real.
Oh no.
Yeah.
This is among the toughest, most impossible challenges that a human being can accept. I'm offering you a monotheism that requires that you stop the immediate necessity of bowing down to idols. Now, in the ancient world, I can't begin to imagine how difficult that was. But I think we're still stuck with the issue of idols and how difficult it is to really walk away from what that attachment means. So, yes, do you really want to have religious values? Be careful before you answer that. Because as you described, often that puts you in direct opposition to the majority. If you're serious about wanting to be, quote, religious, prophetic,
Yeah, and
you're going to have a tough life.
and a correlative to that becomes obvious in the church's passion story, right? Is the mob is always wrong. And so it's yeah, it's, I mean, I think, yeah, to take seriously that the expectation that we do have enemies and that our faithfulness will make it so that we have enemies. But also then that we are willing to not just resist the mob, but maybe be reflective and discerning about how we are caught up in different sorts of popular movements and propaganda.
No, there is something very real about the contagion of the crowd. What does it mean to be sucked in by the noise, the physicality? You can watch it here in Brazil during Carnival. There are bloco bands, small individual samba bands that move through the neighborhoods. And you follow them. And you want to be part of the crowd. The singing, the beer drinking, the dancing, okay. This is not a matter of being an individual. It's a matter of being inside a group, having a group experience. And the heat, the sound, the fun, okay, I get it. It's great. But thousands of people protesting outside a university on behalf of those who seek annihilation. No, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Really, this connection between a university, which inherently means critical thought, not binary, simple ideas. If you want to have a serious conversation about tough decision making in a complicated history and the area today, that's fine. That's great. But that does not mean simple catchphrases and we're all going to scream the same thing at the same time.
Yeah. Liat writes, one more area in which rebirth is sorely needed is in the diaspora. Anti-Semitism, which is as old as Western society, these days seems to seep into much of the public discourse around Judaism, Jewish people, and Israel. I am not blind to my country's failings, but it is deeply troubling how this conflict, which was started in the most violent way by Hamas, has contributed to a rise in violent anti-Semitic acts. Rebirth in the diaspora would allow for the full expression of Jewish life without fear, both in Israel and around the world.
Amen, the amen.
And that talking about the mob, Joseph, that connects to the other piece that you sent me, by Joshua Hoffman, and why Israel is losing the war of words. Can you summarize what Joshua writes in his newsletter?
Well, I can't summarize it because I'm not sure I even can fully fathom all of its complexities. Hasbara, Israel, has never, in my opinion, done a very good job in public relations. For a country of my brethren, and they're a great startup country, they have failed at keeping the narrative. The narrative seems to be easily controlled by others. Look, I can't understand how 136, however many yet are alive, hostages have literally been pushed to the back of the shelf. Forget shelf life. They're not part of the equation. What is it that happened when Israel decided it was going to destroy an eliminationist terrorist organization? How long did the world decide, we will permit you to defend yourselves, and then we're going to put brackets around what we mean?
Mm-hmm.
We missed the segue, after which we've lost the narrative. in which we now defend ourselves for the right of defending ourselves. We are unaware that the words we use to describe who we are have now become words that label us, that are tags. Joseph, I had no idea you felt that you were a Zionist. I had no idea that there was any point in which I was never a Zionist. The complexity of what it means for Israel to lose the narrative is added by the global diaspora Jewish community, each in its own different sphere, defending itself against claims, what? Down from the horrific misstatement in the New York Times, later apologized for and explained, people will always assume the worst. And then the conversation begins with really, that's what you're there. So she is correct in ending with, by the way, I'm going to continue to live in Israel. We will somehow find a way past this. What will world Jewry do now that it better understands its fractured and very fragile, sometimes tenuous relationship all over the world?
And relatedly, this section here in this article from the Future of Jewish, I'll just read it. By focusing on political liberation for a small group of Arabs, I don't know. I can't remember who the it is here. By focusing on political liberation for a small group of Arabs, it ignored the fact that Israel is a small state whose existence is threatened by the surrounding Arab states, and rebranded the Jews from victims to oppressors, a much more effective communications strategy, and the first step in reframing the conflict between the Arabs and the Jews from a religious jihad to secular nationalism, and a quest for political self-determination, a posture far less offensive to the West, especially in the wake of overwhelming guilt following the Holocaust. Since then, the Palestinians seem to be playing a strategic long game of disinformation and chaos to entrench themselves in an easy-to-sell forever state of victimhood. You can make the case that they have adopted a Putin-esque strategy of dramaturgia, the staging of deliberate provocations to destabilize Israel and other countries' relationships with it, including the U.S. What I appreciate about this article is I don't know that we, at least Gentiles in America, I don't know that we appreciate how the communication around the conflict has shifted from a religious one to one of secular nationalism. That makes it a lot easier for especially young progressives in America to identify with.
There are currently 2 or 3 significant essays, which I can forward to you, that outline the direct implication of civil rights post George Floyd, and the idea that people of color have collectively now joined in a common global passion of liberation. So it doesn't matter what I've done in civil rights. It doesn't matter that I helped found a AIDS orphanage for children who are all children off the grid in India, all children of color. No, you are white. So you begin every conversation with the necessity of self-realizing racism. Okay, I missed the email telling me that I should begin every conversation by saying I'm white, privileged, and sorry. So we lost control over a discourse in which we moved from being displaced person survivors to an oppressive, racist project. For those of us that support the state of Israel, you support an oppressive, racist project. A mob doesn't have quiet, critical reflection. It needs binary phrases on signs.
Mm-hmm.
So, what this essay is attempting to do is begin the painful realization. We thought in North American progressive discourse, we were sharing in the quote, overarching arc of liberal progress. The Anti-Defamation League always absorbed everybody who faced discrimination. Why? Because if Puerto Ricans face discrimination and we ignore it, we will ultimately add to our own discrimination. We thought we help everybody, and at some point, that helps us. Complex, but value-oriented progressive values.
Yeah. So the Joshua Hoffman goes on to write, surely, though, it is challenging to explain to the average casual onlooker that before the founding of the State of Israel, Jews were told to go back to Palestine. Yet after its founding, Jews have been told to get out of Palestine. Just like now, the same people who were saying that Gaza was occupied by Israel are now afraid that Gaza will be occupied by Israel. To we Jews, this double standard is an obvious case of anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism, especially nowadays, is a weird phenomenon because it comes from both the political left and the right.
And I think for people who are unaware of what has happened to the discourse, post October 7th has been one of those moments of what I call the 2x4 theology check-in. You're walking down the street, and as you turn a corner, a 2x4 hits you in your forehead. Totally unexpected, for which there simply are no textbooks available. Post October 7th is going to now become a benchmark of how we know ourselves, not only in Israel, but out of Israel. Not only for what people have said to us, but increasingly what people refuse to say to us. The devastation physically and in terms of life in Gaza is horrific. I have said since the beginning of our conversations, I cannot begin to stipulate my sense of emotional, ethical, religious horror. I can't. I don't have the vocabulary necessary. But it was stimulated by a massacre. It did not occur in a vacuum. There is no quantified proportionality. We're all going to have to rebuild from this.
Mm-hmm.
And now they want prisoners for the remains and the live hostages. I don't know many countries that will pay the price the state of Israel will be forced to pay in order to get the remains of those who were kidnapped simply so they can be buried. This was the purpose of Hamas's massacre, to free the prisoners of liberation. How I can't begin to imagine what process that will mean. And to argue about it is to already enforce the tautology with which anti-Semites look at me.
Well,
all in a politicized moment globally.
So, Joseph, to someone listening to you right now, what would you have them do that might be one constructive, positive gesture towards a more hopeful future?
I said early on, if you have a Jewish friend, just call and ask, how are you? What is this like right now? If you hear someone say in your family, in your work environment, something that is outrageous, don't remain silent. Don't pick the public setting to challenge the person, but at least ask the person in an appropriate way. Are you aware of what you're adding to? We're moving into Lent, which moves into Easter. That was the period when pogroms most often took place, when the Christ killers could be sought out. Most of us are not called Christ killers anymore. There are new idioms used. I think anybody this Lent, this Easter, who wants to quietly make the world safer for Jews, it is to just once challenge someone who has said something that darkens the world.
That's good advice.
It is to absorb the one word from the op-ed, to find the courage to seek rebirth where revenge and retribution might be easier.
You mentioned Lent.
America.
I didn't want to step on your toes.
No.
I was
Lent.
just, you mentioned Lent. The passage that always bridges the season of Epiphany and the season of Lent is the Transfiguration, where Jesus appears. There's a theophany to a few of the disciples, where Jesus appears in glory with Moses and Elijah with him. And Peter makes a suggestion about like, oh, we should build booths and stay here. Um, what do your Jewish eyes call out on that scene for people?
That Moses and Elijah were using a common discourse with Jesus the Judean, and they didn't have to translate anything. Yeah, let's stop on the way, but while we're stopping, we can build some booths, some sukkot, some tabernacles that give us a quiet place to rest. We need a few quiet places to rest. On any given day, we become so overstimulated that I don't know where to sit down and take it all in. Cabinet member was nearly impeached for the first time in 157 years, failed a political act that is literally 180 degrees in direct opposition to the failure of the same Republican House who won't solve the problem on the border. My brain exploded all day yesterday. They are going to impeach the man who has failed to do what they won't vote for. How is it possible that I'm living in a universe where this is occurring? Yes, let's stop and build some booths and just be quiet for a while.
You didn't know I was going to ask you that question, and you landed that plane perfectly.
Thank you. Look, we all need, and we're all alone and together at the same time.
Well,
I have no idea what others thought of yesterday, but an appeals court said, no, you can't have immunity. The House of Representatives didn't vote to impeach and are refusing to engage in a solution for a border that is utter chaos. On any given year, any one of those would be enough. So, yes, I want to build some booths and be quiet. And maybe that's what we can do in our conversations in a Lenten series that I hope will attract questions and then quiet reflection.
Amen. Well, Joseph, thank you for your time. I hope you go enjoy a healthy Brazilian lunch.
I will, and thank you. And I hope you find a place to have a booth ready for Moses and Elijah and Jesus.
Take care.